Hi guys, so this video here is taken from a full course on building a track from scratch in Logic. You'll be able to watch all of the Logic related videos for the course on YouTube. There will be a link to the playlist below for you. But in this course, we're basically building this whole track from scratch. If you want to follow along with that, you can. And if you want to download the project file and all the samples that go with the course, there's a link to that in the description as well. I hope this video is useful to you and that you're able to follow along with the course. Let's jump into it.
Feeling heavy, but now I'm steady, going up from hitting the ground.
Now, already on the drums channel, I've got two EQs. Remember, I've got one doing the sort of lift up that we had before and a roll off here. And I've got the other one that was being used as a filter. The one that's being used as a filter, fine. I'm just going to leave it as is. We're not really going to touch it. However, we might need to work on this one here and just have a listen through the sound as we go along. Now, a general rule for EQ and compression: do you EQ first? Do you compress first? Well, it depends on what you need to do. Think of it this way. If we're going to put a big boost in for an EQ and then compress it, well, we just reduce the dynamics of that big boost. So it kind of defeated the point, because if we boosted by 3 dB and then we compressed by 3 dB, we lost 1.5 dB of that boost that we made, which was kind of pointless in doing. In which case, we'd be in a better position to compress and then do our EQing first. However, if we're removing problem areas, it's often better to EQ first. So in short, there's no specific rule. You're going to have to figure out what works best for you. What I'm going to show you now is a really simple technique I use to find problem sounds and areas that we might want to adjust. Now, the EQ on the drums at the minute, it sounds all right. The drums definitely need some work though. So something I'll do here is I'll take a band that's not being used like this, and I'll give a ridiculously high boost like this. And this is why we've got the limiter on. Now, using the mouse wheel, we can just narrow off that cue. And I don't want it to be too narrow and too harsh. And what I'm then going to do is I'm going to sweep through, and I'm going to be listening to bits that stand out and sound really nice and bits that don't, essentially. There, for example, really brings the shaker out. Lets me know you might want to work on the shaker a little bit and bringing that out in the mix. That's bringing out a lot of the ride. There's something that's not too nice, so we're going to narrow it off a bit more. Really try and find it. There it is. You can hear that kind of horrible resonant frequency, right? Well, now I've found it and we're bang on where it is. I'm actually just going to dial that out just a little bit, just like that. And we'll do the same process again. Now we've got a similar thing going on here with 1K, right? Or around 1K. But it's not an unpleasant sound. It's kind of like rhythmic, right? I want you to just listen to that and then compare it to this one just here. That's unpleasant and uncomfortable, right? Whereas this is actually kind of in tune. It's still a resonant frequency, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. Now we're getting into like the box range here, sort of the 400 through 600 area. And having too much in here can really muddy up a mix. It's that muddy region. So this here, this can probably take a dip. Now it's not a specific frequency I want to cut here, so I'm going to broaden this out a bit. Lift it back up. Yeah. That kind of muddies up the whole drums. We don't really need it. We're just going to dial it back just a couple of dB. I've made two small looking but pretty big changes right now, including obviously this big lift up here. So we're just going to A and B the EQ real quick. Damn, so how dry are those drums now? Yeah, so that's a lot more going on, a lot more presence, a lot more clarity to it. The other thing we can do is just A and B the actual adjustment we've made. I think that can actually go another dB down. So it's difficult to hear what this is doing. Focus on the kick drum and the body of the snare when I A-B it. Yeah, they become more prominent because that muddiness is just being dipped away just by a few dB. It makes a big difference. Now this guy here, we might not hear so much, but the problem being when we listen to a track really loud, you know, that 3 dB reduction's being undone. So that frequency that's unpleasant, or maybe even that frequency that's maybe, you know, not. Now this guy here, we might not hear as much, might not be much of an issue. Think of it like this though, if we really turn this track up and that frequency there that's unpleasant is suddenly very, very loud, it's going to become a lot more unpleasant. So dialing it back, sort of a lower level where we might not hear it, makes a difference in the long run. But let's just A-B it. Yes, it's hard to hear that really doing anything, but we know when we boost it, it's there. So if the whole track was to be turned up nice and loud, that unpleasant frequency is there. So we just want to dial it back and control it. In terms of the low end, we seem okay. We've just done a roll off at 20. We can probably bring that up to about 30 without really losing anything. Give a bit of room for our sub as well. Yeah, so that actually helps tighten it up a little bit. It's a little bit flabby now, right? And when we bring it in, listen, it just tightens up that kick. So our EQ changes are like this. Just EQ changes. I think the simple question is, does it sound better with EQ? The answer is yes. I'm in two minds. I might actually dial these back a little bit, but for the minute I'm going to leave them. And we'll see how, if the mix gets too bright, we know they're potentially a culprit. All in all, that's sounding pretty good. So the other thing these drums definitely need is gluing together. At the minute, they sound like lots of separate cut drums with a drum break behind them. Like dead simply, you can hear the individual elements. So we're going to use compression to bring them all together. We're going to use the vintage VCA, which is like based around being an SSL style compressor. First things first, auto gain off. Ratio wise, probably somewhere like 3:1. Take the threshold right off. Now attack on these drums feels like it's going to be somewhere between like 10 and 20 milliseconds. What we can do to find the attack really easily, take the attack to 0, bash the threshold really far back. And look, as we start to lift the attack up, the punchiness starts to come back through. I think it's fair to say around there, 13.5, our punchiness has come back. So knock the threshold back off. Now release time, I generally stick around 80 for D&B tracks. It just fits really well, but you can adjust it to preference depending on what you're after. Knee, I'm just going to leave it roughly around where it is. I don't think it will need adjusting. And I'm just going to dial the threshold back. I want to take about 3 dB out to just squish the drums together a little bit, and then I'm going to lift them back up. We just need to check the peaks on our drum. So at the minute, the break's peaking at about -6. And we're getting a lot of extra gain from the compressor. So we're going to dial the threshold back a bit more. So it's going to compress harder. It will still be in around the same ballpark level-wise. Yeah, so we're compressing by about 5 dB, giving it a gain of about 2.5 back. Now the different modules in Logic, the different modules of compressors all behave a little bit differently. And in this case, this vintage VCA is giving us an extra little bit of gain that we're not necessarily putting in. So we're taking it down by 5, we're adding 2.5 back, but we're somehow still around the same level we were before. So we're getting an extra little bit of lift, and that will likely be due to the algorithm it's being run through to give it kind of that classic SSL feel, bit of noise and stuff in there. But it does a nice job, and we've kept an eye on what we're doing. Our levels are pretty good. We've kept it at the same point. We've compressed it so it feels a little bit louder and bigger anyway. So we're in a good space. And that's pretty much all she wrote in terms of the drum bus. That's all I really need to do. Now, the things I'm hearing now are that maybe the drum break we've used could use a bit of extra compression just to flatten it out a bit more in the mix. And individually, the things like the snares and that are going to need some EQ just to really make the drums fully fleshed out.